Adoption, the fourth type of grandparents' rights. Hi, I'm Tulsa attorney Justin Mosteller, and today is part 4 of a 5-part series about the different types of grandparents' rights in Oklahoma. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about adoption today, and adoption is a very large subject, so we're only really going to skim the surface. But grandparents may find themselves in a situation where they need to adopt their grandchildren. Now, first of all, in an adoption case, um, it typically will arise either through a deprived case where the parents have failed to work their services with DHS. Deprived case is when the state takes custody of a child. The other circumstance that adoption might arise is if the grandparents have been a long term guardian or have been taking care of the grandchildren for a long time, acting in what's called in loco parentis. That means in place of the parents. In those situations, adoption might be a viable option. Really, it's about providing the best long-term, stable environment for a child. And if it's the grandparents, then that's great. Now, in order to proceed in adoption, it matters which way the adoption case is arising. So, if it comes out of the deprived case, at that point, generally the parents will have their rights terminated in a trial leading up to this. And at that point, you file a petition to adopt into the deprived case as well, and also just on its own, and it proceeds to a best interest hearing. The court will now there might be more than one party that's seeking adoption, in which case those best interest hearings can get kind of hairy. So you definitely want to have counsel for this type of case. In the event that there's no dispute and the grandparents are kind of standing unopposed in seeking the adoption, obviously that's a much less complicated case. But adoptions are still complicated by their very nature, so it's most likely not a good decision to go it alone on these kind of cases. Now, if the case is coming from the guardianship, then at that point, you will need to go through a two-step process. The first step is your petition for adoption, and filed along with that will be an application for adoption without consent, or for finding that the child is eligible for adoption without consent. Now, children are eligible for adoption without consent if a parent in Oklahoma has failed to maintain a substantial positive relationship with the child, abandoned the child, or failed to pay child support for the child for a period of 12 out of the last 14 months. And all of those circumstances really require that same time period. So the case gets divided into two hearings. The first hearing is the eligibility hearing. And that hearing, you need to demonstrate that the child is eligible under one of those statutory rules that we just discussed: abandonment, financial failure to financially provide, failure to maintain a substantial positive relationship with the child. Once you clear that hurdle, it's not done yet, because the next phase is the best interest. In a best interest hearing, you have to show by clear and convincing evidence that the best interest of the child would be for the petitioners, the proposed adoption, the grandparents in this case, is a better placement than wherever the child was, or is a better placement. It's a better long-term result for the child to have the grandparents adopt than to say just maintain the guardianship and give the parents additional time to correct the conditions that led to it. Once you're through those two phases, at that point there's just some hoops to jump through and some paperwork to do. DHS might do a home study. They might also waive it if you are the grandparents and have been married together for more than a year, and a few other check boxes that have to be gone through. If the case comes from the deprived side, then DHS is going to be a real prominent feature in that case, and you really need DHS on your side to succeed. But in the guardianship context, or just the in loco parentis context, it really is just up to us. Well, hopefully this has answered some of those questions you might have about adoption. I look forward to speaking to you in part 5 of this series. And if you have any questions or you'd like to discuss your situation, give us a call and we'll be happy to help.